While my mother-in-law was busy playing stylist for my husband's mistress, using my hard-earned money, she did not realize I was already rewriting her reality. She thought she was the queen of the church, and I was just her ATM. But she was about to learn that, when you bite the hand that feeds you, you eventually starve. One swipe, one broken card, and her entire house of cards was about to fall. My name is Simone, and at 34, I thought I had built the perfect life, a penthouse in Chicago Gold Coast, a husband I adored, and a career as a senior investment partner that I built from the ground up, from the south side to the boardroom. But 10 minutes ago, a single text message changed everything. Before I tell you how I brought an entire dynasty to its knees, let me know where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe. If you have ever been the bank account for people who do not respect you. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and I was sitting at the head of a mahogany table staring down a group of skeptical investors when my phone vibrated against the glass surface. Normally I would ignore it, but this was a priority alert from American Express. $5,400 at Gucci, Chicago. Magnificent mile authorized on card, ending in 4009. That was my Centurion card, the black card I had given to my mother-in-law Bernice for emergencies only. I felt the blood drain from my face. Bernice had told me she was at her weekly Bible study group praying for the less fortunate. Apparently the less fortunate needed limited edition. Italian leather. My husband Dante had told me he was in an all-day strategy session for his startup, a company that had not generated a single dollar of profit in 3 years, yet somehow required endless rounds of funding from my personal accounts. Neither of them should have been shopping on a Tuesday afternoon. I stood up, interrupting the senior analyst, mid-sentence. I apologize, gentlemen. Something urgent has come up regarding my family. We will have to reschedule. I did not wait for their response. I grabbed my purse and walked out, my heels clicking against the marble floor with a rhythm that matched my racing heart. I got into my Porsche, the one car I kept in my name, and drove toward Michigan Avenue, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The drive gave me too much time to think. I thought about the penthouse Bernice lived in, rent-free, the one I bought under an LLC, so she could brag to her church friends about her successful son. I thought about the Range Rover she drove, paid for by my company, leased under the guise of transportation services. I thought about the $10,000 check I wrote last month for her church building fund just so she could stand at the pulpit and be praised. I arrived at the Gucci store in record time. The security guard recognized me immediately, nodding respectfully as he held the door open. "Miss Simone, good to see you again," he said, but his eyes darted nervously toward the back of the store. He knew trouble was brewing. I walked past the displays of handbags that cost more than my first car, my eyes scanning the room. And then I saw them. Bernice was sitting on a plush velvet ottoman holding a glass of champagne that the store offered to VIP clients. She looked regal in her Sunday best, a silk scarf tied elaborately around her neck, but it was who she was with that made my stomach turn. Jasmine. Jasmine was 24 years old, an Instagram model with perfect skin and a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. She was standing in front of the mirror, admiring a pair of crystal-embellished heels that sparkled under the store lights. Bernice was smiling at her with a warmth she had never once shown me. "Oh, honey, those look divine," Bernice cooed, taking a sip of champagne. "They elongate your legs perfectly. Much better than how they would look on Simone. She has such sturdy ankles, like a workhorse. But you look like a princess." I froze, behind a rack of silk blouses, my breath catching in my throat. Hearing it was one thing, but seeing it was another. My mother-in-law was not just shopping, she was grooming my replacement. Jasmine giggled, twirling in front of the mirror. Dante said, "You have the best taste, Mama." He was right. "These are expensive, though. Are you sure it is okay?" Bernice waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please do not worry about the price Dante wants you to have. The best. Besides, that card has a limit higher than God himself. We might as well use it before Simone checks the statement. She is so penny-pinching, always watching every dime, like she is still living in the projects you would think with all her money. She would learn how to live a little, but you cannot buy class. Honey, it is in the blood. The audacity hit me like a physical slap. Here was a woman who had never worked a corporate job in her life. A woman whose entire lifestyle was funded by my 80-hour work weeks, sitting there calling me cheap while spending my money on my husband, Mistress. It was the ultimate betrayal. Not just of my wallet, but of my dignity. I stepped out from behind the rack. My voice, ice cold. Make sure you get a gift receipt. Bernice, you might need to return those when the rent comes due. The silence that fell over the shoe section was deafening. Bernice jumped so hard she spilled champagne on her skirt. Jasmine froze her eyes wide as she looked from me to the shoes on her feet. Simone, Bernice stammered, recovering her composure with frightening speed. What are you doing here, spying on me? I am your mother-in-law. Show some respect. I walked closer, my eyes locked on hers. Respect is earned. Bernice, and theft is a crime. I received a notification for $5,000. Tell me, was that for the shoes, or for your silence about where Dante really is right now? Jasmine tried to take the shoes off, but her hands were shaking. Dante said they were separated. She squeaked, looking at Bernice for help. He said you were just roommates for tax purposes. I laughed, a harsh sound that lacked any humor. Roommates who file joint tax returns and share a bed. Interesting narrative, Bernice. Is that what you tell your prayer circle, that your son is an adulterer, or do you leave that part out when you are testifying about family values? Bernice stood up, her face flushing a deep purple under her makeup. Do not, you dare bring the church into this. Dante is a man with needs. Needs you clearly cannot meet. Look at you working all the time. Cold, unfeeling Jasmine. Here appreciates him. She supports his dreams. She is soft. Unlike you. Soft, I repeated, stepping into her personal space. Soft, does not pay the mortgage on the penthouse. You live in Bernice. Soft, does not lease that Range Rover parked outside. Soft, did not write the check that fixed the roof of your beloved church. I paid for those things. The workhorse paid for your life. Bernice sneered. You think money makes you better than us. You are just a ghetto girl who got lucky, you think. Buying things makes you family. Well, it does not. Dante married you for your potential, but he stays with you out of pity. The sales associate, a young woman named Sarah, approached tentatively, holding the black card. Miss Simone, should I process this transaction? I looked at the card, the heavy metal rectangle that represented so much of my hard work, my sacrifice. I had worked double shifts, put myself through college, and fought my way into rooms where people looked at me like I was the help, just so I could have this level of security, and I had used it to cushion the lives of people who despised me. No, Sarah, I said, my voice steady. Do not process it. Actually, let me see that for a second. Sarah handed me the card. Bernice reached for it, her long manicured nails clawing at the air. Give that back. That is my card. Dante gave it to me. It has my name on it. Bernice, I said, holding it up to the light, authorized user. That means I authorize you. And right now I am revoking that authorization. I took the card between my hands and bent it. The metal was strong, but my rage was stronger. With a sharp snap, I broke the card in half. Then I put the two pieces together and snapped them again, dropping the shards onto the plush carpet at Bernice. Feet. There, I said. Dusting off my hands, transaction declined. Jasmine gasped. Kicking off the expensive heels and stepping back into her own sneakers, Bernice looked at the broken pieces of plastic like I had just murdered a family member. You will regret this, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. Dante will hear about this. You cannot treat his mother this way. He will leave you, Simone. Mark my words. He will leave you and take everything. Let him try, I said, turning my back on them. Tell him to call me when he is done playing house. I will be at the office making more money that you will never see again. I walked out of the store, my head held high, ignoring the whispers of the other customers. My heart was pounding against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I got back into my Porsche and sat there for a moment watching through the store window as Bernice screamed at the sales associate trying to make her tape the card back together. This was just the beginning. She thought this was a tantrum, a moment of anger. She had no idea that I had not just canceled a card, I had just initiated a war. And unlike Dante and his failed startups, I never entered a deal I did not intend to close. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer, Arthur Brooks. He answered on the first ring, knowing I never called during trading hours, unless the building was on fire. Arthur, I said, starting the engine. I need you to pull the files on the penthouse, the cars and the prenuptial agreement. Is everything all right, Simone? He asked, his voice concerned. Everything is finally clear, I replied. I want them out, Arthur. I want them all out. Evict. Bernice repossessed the cars and served Dante with divorce papers, freezing his access to all joint accounts. And Arthur, do it today. I pulled away from the curb, merging into the chaotic Chicago traffic for the first time in years. I did not feel the weight of their expectations or the burden of buying their love. I felt light, dangerous, and ready to burn it all down. Bernice wanted to talk about where I came from. She was about to remember that growing up with nothing teaches you how to survive losing everything. Let us see if she has the same skill set. The drive from the Magnificent Mile to my home in the Gold Coast usually took 15 minutes, but today it felt like driving through a tunnel of fire. Every red light was an opportunity for my mind to replay the scene at the Gucci store. The way Bernice looked at Jasmine with adoration, the way she looked at me with disdain, and the way she held my credit card like a royal scepter, granting her power she did not earn. I gripped the leather steering wheel of my Porsche until my hands ached. This car was the only thing I owned that they did not touch. Dante drove the company G-Wagon I bought for tax purposes, and Bernice drove the Range Rover I leased because she claimed her arthritis required a luxury SUV with heated massage seats. I paid $1,500 a month so she could drive to church and gossip about how I was not good enough for her son. As I turned onto Lake Shore Drive, the city skyline rose up before me, a testament to wealth and power, a world I had fought tooth and nail to enter. I looked up at the high-rise building where Bernice lived. The penthouse occupied the top floor with panoramic views of Lake Michigan. I remembered the day I signed the closing papers 2 years ago. I had sat in the lawyer office signing check after check for the down payment, the closing costs, the furnishing fees. Dante had sat next to me playing on his phone, barely paying attention. When I handed Bernice the keys later that afternoon, I expected a hug, maybe a thank you. Instead, she had walked into the living room, wrinkled her nose, and asked why I chose the unit facing the lake instead of the city skyline, she said. The water looked lonely. She said the marble floors were too cold. She said she would need a decorator to fix my mistakes. I had swallowed my pride then, just like I always did. I told myself it was worth it to keep the peace to make Dante happy to have a family. But now, as I drove past that building, knowing she was probably inside right now, calling Dante to complain about me, the bile rose in my throat. I had not just bought her a home. I had bought her a stage. I paid her utilities. I paid her HOA fees. I even donated $5,000 a month to her church building fund under her name so she could sit in the front pew and be treated like a matriarch. I bought her the hats she wore to Sunday service, the organic groceries she insisted on eating, and the plane tickets for her annual trips to visit relatives down south. I was not a daughter-in-law. I was a scholarship fund, and she had just tried to use my tuition money to pay for my replacement. My phone rang through the car Bluetooth system, cutting through my thoughts. The name Mother Bernice flashed on the dashboard screen for a second. I considered ignoring it, letting her scream into the void. But I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the audacity, so I could burn the bridge completely without looking back. I tapped the answer button on the steering wheel. You petty little girl. Bernice's voice filled the cabin, shrill and distorted by the speakers. You have absolutely no class making a scene like that in public. Do you know who I am in this city? I kept my eyes on the road merging into traffic. I know exactly who you are, Bernice, I said, my voice calm and deadly. You are a woman whose credit line just got declined. How dare you! She screamed, and I could hear the rustle of shopping bags in the background. She must have salvaged whatever she could afford with cash. Or maybe Jasmine paid for a keychain. How dare you humiliate me in front of Jasmine? That poor girl looked up to you. She thought you were a lady, but you showed your true colors. You are just a street rat with a checkbook. The insults were familiar old scripts she had used since the day Dante brought me home, but today they hit different because today I held the deed. I humiliated you, I asked, a laugh bubbling up in my chest. Bernice, you were buying shoes for my husband. Mistress with my money. The only person humiliated here is you for thinking I was stupid enough to keep paying for my own betrayal. Mistress, she scoffed, do not use such ugly words. Jasmine is a friend, a family friend. She understands Dante. She listens to him. She does not emasculate him with her career and her long hours. She is soft. Simone, something you will never be, you think, because you pay the bills you get to dictate how we live well. Let me tell you something. Money does not make you the head of this family. Dante is the man and I am his mother. You are just the bank. Just the bank. I repeated the words, tasting like ash. Yes, the bank, she hissed, and banks are supposed to be silent. You open that card back up, Simone. Right now I have errands to run and I need to book a spa day for Jasmine to apologize for your behavior if you do not fix this. I will tell Dante to cut you off emotionally. You know how he gets when he is stressed. You want him to leave you, is that it? You want to die alone in that cold house with nothing but your spreadsheets. The threat was so laughable it was almost tragic. She truly believed Dante was the prize. She believed that withholding his affection, which had been non-existent for months anyway, was a punishment that would bring me to my knees. She had no idea that the man she worshipped was nothing more than a line item on my expense report. A liability I was about to liquidate. I am not opening the card. Bernice, I said, turning onto my street, the gates of my community opening as the sensor recognized my car, and here is a tip for your spa day. Check the balance on your debit card before you go, because I just canceled the automatic transfer for your allowance too. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end, then a low, guttural sound of rage. You would not dare, she whispered. That is my money, Dante said. That was my salary for managing the family affairs. You do not have a salary, Bernice, because you do not have a job, I said, pulling into my driveway, the massive stone house looming above me, cold and dark. Managing family affairs implies you actually do something other than spend my earnings and poison my marriage. The gravy train just derailed. I am going to tell the church elders about this. She threatened, her voice rising again. I will tell them you are financially abusing a senior citizen. I will tell them you are wicked. Tell them, I said, putting the car in park. Tell them whatever you want. But while you are telling them stories, make sure you ask them if they have a spare room, because you might need a place to stay very soon. I hung up before she could respond. Cutting off her screams mid-sentence, silence rushed back into the car, heavy and suffocating. I sat there for a moment, staring at the garage door, my hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. She called me a street rat. She called me the bank. She threatened to have her son leave me as if that were a death sentence. But the most painful part was not the insults. It was the realization of how blind I had been. I had let them treat me this way for years. I had bought their affection, rented their respect, and leased their loyalty. And the moment the money stopped flowing, the mask did not just slip, it shattered. I looked at the house in front of me, a mansion I bought 3 years ago, hoping to fill it with children and laughter and family dinners. Instead, it was a museum of my loneliness, filled with expensive furniture, Dante picked out, and empty rooms he never entered. I got out of the car, slamming the door with a finality that echoed in the quiet evening air. I walked to the front door, my heels clicking on the stone path just like they had in the store, but this time I was not walking away from the problem. I was walking into the heart of it. Dante would be inside, probably sitting on the Italian leather sofa I paid for, watching the 80-inch television I bought, drinking the scotch I imported, waiting for me to come home and apologize for upsetting his mother. He would have his speech ready. He would tell me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that I needed to be more generous. He had no idea that the woman walking through that door was not the wife he had manipulated for 5 years. She was the shark. He had forgotten. I was. She was the senior partner who negotiated multi-million-dollar buyouts before breakfast. And she was about to negotiate the most ruthless exit strategy of her life. I unlocked the door and stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of the expensive cologne Dante wore, another thing I paid for. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of my own naivety. One last time. Then I dropped my keys on the console table, the sound sharp and loud like a gavel striking a desk. It was time to go to work. Not the kind that paid the bills, but the kind that settled the score. Bernice thought I was stingy. She was about to find out just how expensive her betrayal really was. I walked toward the living room where the blue light of the television flickered against the walls, ready to face the man who had sold me out for a pair of shoes and the mother who had cheered him on. Dante was exactly where I expected him to be, lounging on the oversized Italian leather sectional that had cost me $12,000, his feet propped up on the coffee table, one hand loosely gripping a glass of Macallan. 25, the other tapping away at his phone. He looked the picture of relaxation, the unbothered king of a castle he had never paid a mortgage on. The blue light from the massive television flickered across his face, illuminating the handsome features that had once made my knees weak. Now they just made my stomach turn. I walked into the room and threw the broken pieces of the Centurion card onto the table, right next to his drink. They skittered across the glass surface with a sharp clatter, finally coming to rest against his phone. Dante did not even flinch. He slowly looked up from his screen, his eyes heavy with a mixture of boredom and annoyance, as if I were a maid who had just interrupted his favorite show. "You are home early," he said, his voice smooth and devoid of any warmth. "I thought you had a board meeting? Or are we done conquering the corporate world for the day?" I stood over him, my shadow falling across his face. "Cut the act, Dante. I just came from Gucci. I saw your mother, and I saw Jasmine." Dante let out a long, exaggerated sigh and set his phone down. He picked up his scotch, swirling the amber liquid around the ice cubes before taking a slow, deliberate sip. "Here we go again, Simone. You always have to make everything into a drama." "Do not you," Mom called me. She was in tears, she said. "You caused a scene in the middle of the store, screaming like a banshee and embarrassing her in front of her friends." "Friends," I repeated, my voice trembling, not with sadness, but with a rage so pure it felt like fire in my veins. "Since when is Jasmine a friend of your mother? Since when does your mother take 24-year-old Instagram models shopping for $5,000 shoes on my credit card?" Dante rolled his eyes, standing up and stretching as if this conversation were merely a tedious interruption to his evening. "Jasmine is a stylist. Simone, she is helping Mom update her wardrobe for the church gala. Mom is 62 years old. She deserves to feel beautiful. She deserves to be pampered. I thought you of all people would understand that, given how much you like to throw money around to show off." "You are unbelievable," I said, stepping closer to him. "I know who Jasmine is. Dante, do not insult my intelligence. I have seen the way she looks at you. I saw the way you touched the small of her back at the barbecue last month. I brushed it off then, because I trusted you, because I thought my husband had more integrity than to parade his mistress around in front of his wife and his mother." Dante laughed, a cold, condescending sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "Mistress, you sound like a character in a soap opera." "Listen to yourself. You are paranoid, Simone. You are working 80 hours a week. You are stressed out of your mind and you are projecting your insecurities onto me just because you are too busy to be a wife does not mean I am out here cheating. Jasmine is a family friend. She is nice to Mom, she listens to her. She is respectful, unlike you, who just threw a temper tantrum in a luxury boutique because you are jealous of a pair of shoes. It is not about the shoes, I shouted, losing my composure for the first time. It is about the disrespect. It is about you using my money to fund a lifestyle for a woman who is sleeping with you. Dante. Face hardened his calm mask, slipping just enough to reveal the cruelty underneath. Stop talking about your money, like it is the only thing that matters. You think, because you bring home the paycheck right now that you own me. My startup is about to close a seed round that will make your hedge fund salary look like pocket change. I am an entrepreneur, Simone. I build things. I do not just move other people's money around like you do. When my company takes off, I will be making $500,000 a month easy, so excuse me if I let my mother enjoy a few perks in advance. I stared at him in disbelief. This was the same lie he had been telling for 3 years. His startup was a shell, a series of failed apps and empty pitches that I had funded to the tune of $200,000, and here he was standing in my living room drinking my scotch, telling me that my career, the one that paid for the roof over his head, was meaningless. Your startup, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Your startup is a hobby. Dante. A hobby. I pay for, just like I pay for everything else in this life. But that stops today. I canceled the cards. I am selling the penthouse, and I am done funding this charade. Dante stepped into my personal space, looming over me, using his height to try and intimidate me. You are not doing anything, he said, his voice low and threatening. You are just throwing a fit because you are tired and emotional. You are going to call the credit card company right now and apologize to them for the mistake. Then you are going to call my mother and apologize to her. You are going to buy her that bag she wanted, and you are going to apologize to Jasmine for being rude. Apologize to Jasmine, I asked, incredulous. Are you insane? I am a man who demands respect in his own house, Dante yelled, slamming his hand down on the coffee table, making the glass jump. You have emasculated me for too long, Simone, walking around here like you are the boss, just because you sign the checks. You are cold, you are distant, and frankly, you are impossible to love right now. Jasmine is sweet, she is kind. She makes Mom feel young again. You could learn a thing or two from her, instead of acting like a bitter, jealous shrew. The gaslighting was so thick, I could almost taste it. He was twisting reality, trying to make me question my own sanity, trying to make me feel guilty for his infidelity. He wanted me to believe that my reaction to his betrayal was the problem, not the betrayal itself. He wanted me to believe that I was the one failing the marriage, because I worked hard to support us while he played house with another woman. I am not apologizing, I said, holding my ground, and I am not opening that card back up. If you want to buy your girlfriend shoes, use your own money. Oh wait, you do not have any? Dante. Face turned a shade of red. I had rarely seen. He pointed a finger in my face, his eyes bulging with rage. You are pushing me, Simone. You are really pushing me. I have tried to be patient with you. I have tried to be understanding of your career obsession, but I am done being treated like a child. If you do not fix this right now, if you do not make this right with my mother, I am leaving. Go, I said, pointing at the door. Get out. He laughed again, a sharp, incredulous bark. You think I am bluffing? I will go. I will pack a bag right now, and I will go stay at Mom's house, where I am appreciated, where I am treated like a king. Mom has been telling me for months that I deserve better than you. She sees how miserable you make me. She sees how you neglect me. Neglect you, I asked, my voice breaking despite my resolve. I bought you this house. I bought you your car. I funded your dreams. I gave you everything. You gave me things, Dante spat. You gave me objects because you do not know how to give love. You are empty, Simone. You are a bank account with a heartbeat, and right now that account is frozen, so you are useless to me. The words hung in the air, brutal and final. They should have crushed me. They should have sent me falling to my knees, begging for his forgiveness, begging him to stay. But instead, they clarified everything. The man standing in front of me was not my husband. He was a parasite, a leech who had attached himself to my success and drained me dry until he found a younger, softer host. He did not love me. He loved the lifestyle I provided. And now that I was threatening that lifestyle, he was showing me his true face. Fine, I said, my voice steady, calmness settling over me like a cold blanket. Go to your mother's, go be a king in the penthouse I paid for, but do not think for a second that you are coming back here. This is not a negotiation, Dante. This is an eviction, Dante sneered, shaking his head as if I were a petulant child. He had to discipline. You will be begging me to come back in 2 days, he said, turning toward the stairs to pack his bag. You cannot handle being alone. Simone, you need me to make you look like a complete woman without me. You are just a lonely workaholic with a big empty house. You will call me crying. You always do. And when you do, the price of my return is going to go up significantly. He stomped up the stairs, and I heard him throwing things around in the bedroom, slamming drawers and closet doors. I stood in the living room, the silence returning, but the air still vibrating with the violence of his words. He was so confident, so sure of his hold over me. He thought this was just another fight, another cycle, where he would withhold his affection, and I would pay to get it back. He had no idea that while he was packing his designer suits into his designer luggage, I was mentally calculating the liquidation value of every asset he touched. He thought he was going to his mother's sanctuary. He thought he had a soft place to land. He did not know that the ground beneath him was already crumbling. He did not know that the penthouse he was retreating to was already on the market. He did not know that the car he was about to drive away in was scheduled for repossession. Let him go, I thought, listening to his heavy footsteps coming back down the stairs. Let him go to Bernice. Let them sit in that glass tower and talk about how terrible I am. Let Jasmine comfort him. Let them enjoy their victory for one more night, because tomorrow, the locks change. Tomorrow, the lawyers get involved. Tomorrow, the bank account, with a heartbeat, stops beating for them. Dante walked past me, dragging his suitcase, his chin held high, refusing to look at me. He opened the front door and paused. "Do not wait up," he said, tossing the words over his shoulder, like trash mom says. "She is cooking my favorite meal tonight. At least someone knows how to take care of me." The door slammed shut, and the sound echoed through the house, final and absolute. I walked to the window and watched him throw his bag into the back of the Porsche. I watched the taillights fade into the distance as he drove away toward the city, toward the woman who hated me, and the mistress who wanted to be me. I did not cry. I did not collapse. I walked to the kitchen, poured the rest of his expensive scotch down the sink and watched it swirl away. Then, I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the private investigator. I had been hesitating to call for weeks. "It is Simone," I said, when the voice on the other end answered. "I am ready to proceed. I want cameras in the penthouse. I want GPS on the cars, and I want everything recorded. He is on his way to her apartment right now. Do not miss a single second." The silence in the house after Dante slammed the door was heavy and suffocating, like the air before a tornado touches down. I stood in the foyer, staring at the empty space where his car had been just moments ago, feeling a strange mixture of grief and liberation. I had kicked him out. I had actually done it. But the adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache in my chest. I was about to pour myself a glass of water when the doorbell rang again, making me jump for a split second. I thought it was Dante coming back to apologize, or maybe to scream some more. I braced myself, pulling my shoulders back, and walked to the door ready for another fight. But when I opened it, I did not see my husband's furious face. Instead, I saw Jamal and Sarah standing on the porch looking anxious. Jamal was Dante's younger brother, but they could not be more different. Where Dante was flashy and arrogant, Jamal was quiet, steady, and a high school history teacher who actually cared about his students. Sarah, his wife, stood next to him holding a Tupperware container, her blue eyes wide with concern. I did not know if I could handle company right now, but seeing the genuine worry on their faces, I stepped aside and let them in. We saw Dante peeling out of the driveway like he was in a Fast and Furious movie. Jamal said, stepping into the foyer. "Is everything okay, Simone?" He looked like he wanted to kill someone. I walked them into the kitchen, the only room in the house that felt neutral right now. Sarah set the container on the island. It was her famous lasagna, the one comfort food that usually made everything better tonight. Even the smell of melted cheese made me feel nauseous. "He is gone," I said, leaning against the marble counter. I cut off the credit cards and he threw a tantrum. He went to stay with Bernice. Sarah let out a breath she had been holding and exchanged a look with Jamal. "See? I told you," she whispered to him. Then she turned to me, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "Honestly, Simone, good riddance." I looked at her, surprised. Sarah had always been polite to Bernice and Dante, even though I knew she found them exhausting. But I had never heard her speak with such open disdain. "You do not know the half of it," I said, feeling the need to unburden myself. "I caught Bernice at Gucci today, buying shoes for Jasmine with my card. $5,000 worth of shoes. And Dante defended her. He called me jealous. He called me a bank account." Jamal slammed his hand down on the counter hard enough to make the silverware rattle. "That is it. I am done covering for him." "Covering for him?" I asked, my stomach dropping. "What do you mean?" "Jamal." Jamal looked at Sarah and she nodded, giving him permission to speak. He ran a hand over his face, looking pained. "Look, Simone, you have been nothing but good to us. You helped with our down payment. You paid for our wedding when Mom refused to help because she did not approve of Sarah. You have been more family to me than my own brother lately, and I cannot sit here and watch him play you anymore. Play me." I repeated the words sounding foreign in my own voice. "It is not just the shoes, Simone." Sarah interjected, her voice trembling with anger. "Bernice has been talking about you for years, and it is vile the way she speaks about you at church teas when you are not there. It turns my stomach. She plays nice to your face because she wants the checks, but behind your back she calls you the help. She tells her friends that Dante married down because you are from the South Side. She says you are too aggressive, too masculine, too dark." The air left my lungs. I knew Bernice did not like me, but hearing it laid out so plainly, hearing that she attacked my very identity while living in the luxury I provided, cut deeper than I expected. "But she loves you." "Sarah," I said, looking at my sister-in-law. "She is always bragging about her daughter-in-law, the nurse. She puts your picture on the mantle." Sarah gave a bitter laugh. "She likes me because I am white. Simone, let us call it what it is. Bernice has this twisted idea of status. She thinks having a white daughter-in-law elevates her. Somehow she treats me like a trophy, but she treats you like a resource. She respects my skin color, but she spends your money. And the worst part is, she tells everyone that Jasmine is the perfect mix. She says Jasmine is what Dante should have married, light-skinned, docile, and willing to let the man lead. She pits us against each other, Simone, and she uses Jasmine as the wedge." I felt sick, physically sick. Bernice colorism was not a secret, but hearing that she actively campaigned against me, using Jasmine as the ideal, was a level of betrayal I had not let myself see. I had spent thousands on hair treatments, wardrobe updates, and etiquette, coaches trying to fit into Bernice's mold of a perfect wife, never realizing that the mold was designed to exclude me from the start. "And it gets worse," Jamal said, his voice low and heavy. "It is not just Mom. Dante has been lying to you about the business for a long time, Simone. Those seed rounds you funded, the emergency capital calls for payroll last year. There was no payroll. There were no investors. It was all Jasmine." I stared at him. my mind racing back through the last 2 years. The late-night panic attacks Dante would have about the company, failing the way he would beg me to liquidate stocks to cover operational costs. The $200,000 I transferred last Christmas, because he said his developers were going to quit. He told me he hired a marketing consultant, I whispered, remembering the line item on the expense report he showed me once. Jasmine is the marketing consultant, Jamal said grimly. He has been paying her a salary. Simone $5,000 a month, plus expenses. Apartment, rent, car lease, travel. All of it funneled through the company account as business expenses. He has been keeping her on a payroll funded entirely by you. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. The room was spinning. I thought about the long nights I spent analyzing market trends, the stress, the ulcers, the missed birthdays and holidays, all to make enough money to support my husband's dreams. And all this time, I was not investing in a tech startup. I was investing in his affair. I was paying a salary to the woman who was sleeping with my husband. How long, I asked, my voice barely audible. Since before you bought the penthouse, Jamal said, looking down at his hands. Sarah and I saw them together at a resort in Cabo 2 years ago. When he told you he was at a tech conference in Austin. We did not know how to tell you. We thought maybe it was a one-time thing. We thought he would snap out of it, but then he asked me to borrow money last week. He said you were tightening the purse strings, and he needed cash to take Jasmine for her birthday. He wanted $5,000 Simone from a high school teacher's salary. The betrayal was total. It was not just a fling, it was a parallel life, a life I had unknowingly financed down to the last cent. I felt a fool, a complete and utter fool. I had prided myself on being smart, on being the one who saw the angles, who read the fine print. Yet in my own home, I had been blind. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, looking at Jamal. Because today was the last straw, he said, looking me in the eye when Mom called me, bragging about the shoes, saying she finally put you in your place. I realize they are not just using you, they are trying to break you, and you do not deserve that, Simone. You are the only real thing in this family. Sarah reached out and hugged me tight, and I finally let a single tear escape, wiping it away furiously before it could reach my chin. Thank you, I said, my voice hardening. Thank you for telling me the truth. What are you going to do? Jamal asked, worry etching lines into his forehead. Dante is going to come for you, Simone. He and Mom, they feel entitled to your money. They are not going to let go easily. I walked over to the drawer where I kept my emergency files and pulled out a fresh legal pad. The shock was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical precision. This was no longer a marriage. It was a hostile takeover. And I was the majority shareholder. I am not going to let them go easily either, I said, picking up a pen. I am going to audit them. Jamal? I am going to audit every single penny. Dante spent every expense report, every transfer, every withdrawal. If he used company funds for personal affairs, that is embezzlement, that is fraud. And since I am the primary investor, I am going to prosecute. Jamal's eyes widened. You are going to send him to jail. If that is where the audit leads, I said, writing down the name of my forensic accountant. And as for Bernice, she thinks she is untouchable because she is old and goes to church. She forgets that I own the building. She prays in, metaphorically speaking, I am going to expose them. Jamal, not just to the courts but to everyone. Sarah looked at me with a mixture of fear and admiration. Watch your back. Simone, Bernice fights dirty. So do I replied, looking at the reflection of my face in the darkened window. Seeing the steel that had returned to my eyes, I grew up fighting for scraps, Sarah. I know how to survive in the mud. Bernice has forgotten what it is like to be hungry. I am about to remind her. I looked at the list on my pad. Item 1, forensic audit. Item 2, eviction notice. Item 3, public relations. Dante and Bernice thought they were playing checkers, moving pieces around the board, assuming I would just sit there and take it. They did not realize I was playing chess, and I had just decided to sacrifice the queen to save the kingdom. Go home. I told Jamal and Sarah. You have done enough. Stay out of the crossfire, because what happens next is going to be ugly, and I do not want you to get hurt. They left, promising to stand by me when the dust settled. I locked the door behind them and turned off the kitchen lights, standing in the darkness of my empty $1 million home. Dante was with Bernice and Jasmine right now, probably laughing, probably drinking my wine, probably planning how to manipulate me back into submission. Let them laugh. Let them plan tomorrow morning. The forensic accountants would arrive tomorrow morning. The locks would change tomorrow morning. The world they built on my back would start to crumble. I walked upstairs to the master bedroom, the room Dante had abandoned, and stripped the sheets off the bed. I would not sleep in the same linens he had lied in. I threw them in the trash pile in the corner. Then I lay down on the bare mattress, staring at the ceiling, plotting my next move. They wanted a war. They were going to get a revolution. The morning sun hit the bare mattress, where I had slept fitfully, the silence of the house pressing against my eardrums like water pressure at the bottom of the ocean. I sat up, my body aching, not from physical exertion, but from the sheer weight of the truth Jamal and Sarah had dumped on my kitchen island the night before. I was not just a wife having a rough patch. I was a mark, a target, a golden goose that my husband and his mother had been plucking feather by feather for 5 years. I walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawn of the estate. I paid to maintain. Usually by this time on a Wednesday, I would be checking global markets, approving trades, and putting out fires for my clients. But today, I had only one fire to manage, and it was burning right here in my own home. My phone began to vibrate on the nightstand, buzzing angrily against the wood. The screen lit up with a photo I had taken years ago, of Bernice holding a Bible, smiling like the saint she pretended to be. I stared at it for a long moment, letting it ring, knowing that whatever was on the other end of that line was going to be the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. I slid my finger across the screen and put it on speaker, setting the phone down on the empty side of the bed, as if distancing myself from the toxicity about to spill out. Simone, Bernice's voice, filled the room, crisp and commanding, as if she were addressing a disobedient child from the pulpit. I assume you have had a night to cool down and realize the magnitude of your error yesterday. I did not answer. I just stood there listening, letting her voice echo in the master bedroom her son had abandoned. Silence is good, she continued, taking my lack of response for submission. It shows you are reflecting, Dante. And I have been talking all morning over breakfast. Jasmine made the most wonderful crepes, by the way. Light and fluffy, not like those heavy bricks you try to pass off as pancakes on Sundays. The mention of Jasmine making breakfast in my penthouse using my groceries for my husband sent a fresh wave of nausea through me, but I swallowed it down, forcing myself to remain clinical. This was data gathering. This was evidence. Here is the situation, Simone Bernice said, and I could hear the clinking of silverware in the background, the casual sounds of them enjoying a life I funded while I stood in the wreckage. Dante is very hurt. He feels emasculated by your public display of financial control. You humiliated him by cutting off his resources, and you humiliated me by causing a scene at Gucci. We are willing to overlook this lapse in judgment. But there are conditions. Conditions. I repeated the word, slipping out before I could stop myself. A dry rasp. Yes, conditions. Bernice snapped, her tone sharpening. First, you will call American Express immediately and reinstate the Centurion card with an increased limit. Dante has business expenses coming up, and he cannot be embarrassed by a declined transaction again. Second, you will issue a formal apology to me and to Jasmine for your behavior yesterday. You will admit that you were jealous and hormonal and that you overreacted. I gripped the edge of the dresser, my knuckles turning white, The audacity was breathtaking, but she was not done. Third, she continued, and this is non-negotiable. You will transfer $10,000 into my personal account by noon today. Call it a penalty for emotional distress. Call it an apology tax. I do not care what you label it on the wire transfer, but I need to see that money cleared before I even consider forgiving you. And if I do not, I asked, my voice steady, despite the trembling in my hands. Bernice laughed, a low, throaty sound that made my skin crawl. If you do not, Simone, then Dante is ready to file the papers. He is sitting right here, and we have already discussed the timeline. Jasmine is young, she is fertile, and she is ready to be a wife, in every sense of the word. Dante wants a family. Simone, he wants a legacy, and let us be honest, at 34, with your high-stress job and your cold demeanor, you are drying up. You are a bad investment for a man who wants children. I felt the air leave the room, drying up. A bad investment. These were not just insults. They were calculated strikes at my deepest insecurities, using the very business language I lived by to devalue my existence as a woman. Dante, I called out, speak to me. Tell me this is what you want. There was a shuffling sound. Then my husband's voice came through the speaker, cool and detached, as if he were ordering a coffee. Mom is right, Simone. We cannot go on like this. I need a partner who supports me, not a warden who controls my spending. Jasmine understands my vision. She respects the hustle you have become, bitter. Simone and I cannot build a future with bitterness if you do not fix this today. If you do not make Mom happy, I am filing for divorce tomorrow, and do not think I will walk away empty-handed. I know where you hide the money. The line went dead, leaving me standing in the silence of the bedroom, the threat hanging in the air like smoke. He knew where I hid the money. That was the line that snapped the last tether of my emotional attachment. He did not care about saving the marriage. He did not care about my feelings or our history. He only cared about the access he was threatening to replace me with, a 24-year-old mistress. Not because he loved her, but because she was the path of least resistance to my bank account. He was leveraging my fear of being alone, my fear of being a failure of a wife, to extort me. I walked into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I saw the lines of exhaustion around my eyes, the tension in my jaw. But I also saw something else, something I had not seen in a long time. I saw the girl from the South Side who had clawed her way out of poverty, who had outsmarted Ivy League graduates and Shark Tank investors to build an empire. They thought I was weak because I loved them. They thought I was stupid because I gave freely. They mistook my generosity for obligation and my silence for submission. Bernice wanted $10,000 for emotional distress. She wanted an apology. She wanted me to fund the lifestyle of the woman stealing my husband, and Dante wanted to threaten me with divorce, thinking I would crumble, thinking I would pay any price to keep the title of Mrs. Dante Williams. I picked up the phone again, but this time I did not call Dante. I did not call Bernice. I dialed the number for Arthur Brooks, my lawyer, the shark who handled my hostile takeovers. Arthur, I said when he answered, his voice thick with sleep. It was barely 7 in the morning. Wake up. I need you to open the file on the prenuptial agreement, specifically the infidelity clause and the morality clause regarding the company assets. Simone, Arthur asked, his voice sharpening instantly. What happened? They issued an ultimatum, I said, walking back into the bedroom and pulling a suitcase from the closet. Not for Dante packing this time, but for the files I needed to transport to the war room. They want cash, they want the cards back, and they threaten to replace me with the mistress. If I do not comply, I see, Arthur said, his tone shifting from friend to litigator. Do you want to negotiate? No, Arthur, I said, throwing my laptop and my hard drives into my bag. I do not negotiate with terrorists, and I do not negotiate with family who hold my heart for ransom. Burn it. Arthur, burn it all. Initiate the eviction proceedings for the penthouse, immediately send the repossession team for the cars, and freeze every single joint asset we have. I want them to feel the air leave the room. I want them to reach for their wallets and find nothing but lint. Consider it done, Arthur said. I will meet you at the office in an hour. Bring the evidence Jamal gave you. I hung up and zipped the bag. The sound loud in the empty room. I looked around at the house I had bought, the life I had built for us. It was all a lie, a stage set for a play where I was the only one who did not know her lines. But the play was over, the curtain had fallen, and the critics were about to be silenced. Bernice thought she had played a winning hand with her ultimatum. She thought the threat of loneliness would break me. She forgot that I learned how to be alone long before I learned how to be rich. She forgot that I was comfortable in the cold. I walked out of the bedroom and down the stairs, my footsteps steady, my heart cold. They wanted a bad investment. I was about to show them exactly what a liquidation looked like. I was not just going to divorce Dante. I was going to erase him. I was going to make sure that when he walked out of that penthouse, he would not even have a credit score to rent a studio apartment. I grabbed my keys and walked out the front door, locking it behind me for the last time as a wife. From this moment on, I was the CEO of my own survival, and business was about to be booming. The glass doors of the Brooks and Sterling law firm shut behind me, cutting off the noise of the city and leaving me in the hermetically sealed silence of expensive jurisprudence. I walked past the receptionist, who knew better than to ask if I wanted coffee, and went straight to the corner office, where Arthur was already spreading documents across a conference table that cost more than Dante's entire startup valuation. Arthur looked up as I entered, his face grim but focused. He had been my lawyer since my first big promotion, since before Dante, since before the penthouse. He knew where the bodies were buried, because he had helped me dig the holes. "You look like you are ready to kill someone," Arthur said, pulling out a chair for me. "I am not here for murder." "Arthur, I am here for an autopsy," I said, dropping my bag onto the table. "I want to dissect every single asset, and I want to know exactly how much pain I can legally inflict." Arthur opened the first file, the blue folder containing the prenuptial agreement we had drafted 5 years ago. I remembered the day Dante signed it. He had been so arrogant, so sure of his impending billionaire status. He had actually insisted on a strict separation of assets clause because he did not want me coming after his future tech empire when we inevitably outgrew each other. "Look at this," Arthur said, tapping a paragraph on page 15. Dante was so worried about protecting his intellectual property that he agreed to a total waiver of alimony and a forfeiture of any marital claim to assets held in separate corporate entities. If infidelity could be proven, he essentially signed his own death warrant because he thought he was the only one with a future. I leaned forward, looking at the signature that was about to cost my husband everything he insisted on. That clause, I remembered, a cold smile touching my lips. He told me he did not want a wife who was with him for his potential. Well, now he is going to leave with exactly what he brought to the marriage, which is nothing. Arthur nodded, moving to the next file. The real estate documents. This is where it gets interesting. Bernice thinks you gave her the penthouse as a gift. She has been telling her friends it is in her name, but the deed is held by SJW Holdings, LLC, your private investment shell company. Exactly, I said. Bernice signed a tenancy at will agreement when she moved in. She probably did not even read it. She just saw the view and the marble floors and signed where I told her to. Arthur chuckled, a dry, dangerous sound. That means she is not a homeowner, Simone. She is a tenant. A tenant who has not paid rent in 2 years because you have been subsidizing it through the company as a charitable donation tax write-off. But since you stopped the payments yesterday, she is technically in default. As the managing member of the LLC, you have the right to issue an immediate notice to vacate, especially since we can prove she has unauthorized occupants staying there. Unauthorized occupants, I asked Jasmine. Arthur said, sliding a report across the table. My paralegal pulled the building security logs. Jasmine has been issued a key fob by Bernice. She has been coming and going for months, staying overnight at least 3 times a week. That violates the occupancy clause of the lease, which explicitly states the unit is for the sole residence of Bernice Williams. I felt a surge of vindication. So she was not just spending my money, she was housing my replacement in my property. The eviction notice was not just business anymore. It was a cleansing draft. I said. Serve her the papers the morning after the party. I want the sheriff there. I want her to see the locks being changed while she is still hungover from her celebration. Now about the cars. Arthur continued pulling up the vehicle registrations, the Range Rover and the Porsche. They are leased under your primary consulting firm. Dante is listed as an authorized driver for business purposes only. And I assume driving his mistress to spas and driving his mother to Gucci does not constitute business purposes, I said. It constitutes misuse of company assets, Arthur confirmed, and since you are the sole proprietor, you can revoke his driving privileges immediately. More importantly, we can report the vehicles as stolen if he refuses to return them once the notice is served. Given the value of the cars, that is grand theft auto. I sat back in the leather chair, feeling the pieces falling into place. It was a trap, a beautiful legal trap that Dante and Bernice had walked into, willingly blinded by their own greed and entitlement. They thought I was just a woman with a checkbook. They forgot I was a woman who read the fine print. There is one more thing, Arthur said, his expression turning serious. He pressed a button on his intercom. Send him in. The door opened, and a man I did not recognize walked in. He was average height, nondescript, the kind of man you would pass on the street and forget 5 seconds later, which made him perfect for his job. This is Mr. Vance. Arthur introduced us. He is the best private investigator in Chicago, and he specializes in high net worth divorces. Vance sat down and placed a small black device on the table. It looked like a smoke detector. I understand you need proof of infidelity inside the marital home, Vance said, his voice gravelly and low. Not my home. I corrected. The penthouse. Bernice apartment. Dante is staying there now, and I know Jasmine is with him. I need undeniable proof. I need footage that holds up in court, footage that triggers the morality clause in the prenup and voids any claim he might try to make for spousal support. Vance nodded, picking up the device. This is a 4K wide-angle camera with a microphone. It looks exactly like the smoke detectors already installed in the penthouse. Luxury units usually have hardwired systems, so swapping one out will take me less than 10 minutes. I also have pinhole cameras that can be hidden in the living room decor. How do we get you inside? I asked. Bernice is there all the time. Not tomorrow, Arthur interjected, smiling. Tomorrow, Bernice and Dante will be out spending your money, preparing for the gala. You are going to open the credit line back up, Simone. Just for 24 hours. I looked at Arthur, shocked. You want me to give them money? I want you to give them rope. Arthur corrected. Give them the card back. Apologize. Play the submissive wife. Let them think they won. Let them go out and shop for their big night while they are distracted spending $40,000 on dresses and champagne. Vance will get into the penthouse, install the surveillance, and we will catch them celebrating their victory. It was genius, it was cruel, and it was perfect. They would be so drunk on their own success, so blinded by their apparent triumph over me, that they would never look up at the smoke detector. They would never suspect that the wife they called stupid was watching them dig their own graves. I can do that, I said, feeling a cold resolve settle in my chest. I can play the part. I can be the defeated wife for one more day. Good, Vance said, pocketing the device. I will need a key fob and the security code for the building. I gave him my spare set, the ones I kept in my safe deposit box. Bernice thought she had the only access. She thought she was the queen of the castle. She did not know the landlord was coming for an inspection. Vance left to prepare his equipment, leaving me alone with Arthur. The legal war room was silent. Save for the hum of the air conditioning, the table was covered in paper trails of my generosity and their deceit. deeds, titles, contracts. Every single one of them, a weapon I was about to wield. You realize once we pull this trigger, there is no going back, Arthur said, gathering the files. You are going to destroy him. Simone, not just financially, but socially. You are going to humiliate his mother in front of her entire world. I stood up, smoothing down my skirt. I thought about the shoes. I thought about the text messages, calling me a bad investment. I thought about the years of being made to feel small in a house I paid for. I am not destroying them, Arthur, I said, walking to the door. I am just liquidating a failed asset. They wanted a return on their investment. Well, they are about to get it. Have the eviction notice ready for Sunday morning. Noon sharp. I walked out of the office and into the elevator, watching the numbers count down to the lobby. I had to go home. I had to call Dante. I had to apologize. I had to give them their credit card back. I had to be the perfect victim for 48 more hours. But as the doors opened to the street, I smiled. It was going to be the best performance of my life, because I knew exactly how the final act ended and the applause was going to be deafening. The elevator ride up to the penthouse felt like an ascent to the gallows, but I reminded myself that I was not the one being executed. I was the executioner in disguise, checking my reflection in the polished steel doors. I adjusted my expression, softening the lines of determination into a mask of contrition and defeat. I needed to look broken. I needed to look like a woman who had realized she could not live without her husband and his parasitic family. When the doors opened directly into the foyer, Bernice was already waiting, seated on a velvet bench like a queen holding court. Dante stood behind her, arms crossed his face, set in a smug expression of triumph. Jasmine was nowhere to be seen, likely banished to the guest room to maintain the illusion of propriety. Now that the bank was back in the building, Simone. Bernice said, her voice dripping with condescension. You finally decided to show your face. I assume you have come to your senses. I walked into the room, keeping my head lowered, shoulders slumped. I am sorry, Bernice, I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. I was out of line yesterday. The stress of work got to me, and I took it out on you and Dante. I should never have canceled the card or spoken to you that way. Dante stepped forward, a smirk playing on his lips. See, Mom? I told you she would come crawling back. You cannot survive without us. Simone, you need this family to give your life meaning. Without us, you are just a lonely woman in an empty house. You are right, Dante, I said, forcing myself to look him in the eye without vomiting. I was scared. I thought I was losing you, and I panicked. I do not want to lose you. I do not want to be alone. Bernice stood up, smoothing down her silk skirt. Well, at least you are admitting it now about the conditions we discussed. The $10,000, the apology to Jasmine. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. I just transferred $20,000 to your account. Bernice, consider it an apology and a late birthday gift. And as for Jasmine, I will apologize to her personally if you like. Bernice's eyes lit up at the mention of the money, $20,000. She repeated, a greedy smile spreading across her face. Well, that is a start. It shows you are serious about making amends. And the card? I reached into my purse and pulled out a brand new platinum card. I had ordered from the bank this morning. It was linked to the same account as the old one, but with a temporary limit. Increase I had authorized just for this trap. Here, I said, handing it to her. It is active and I raised the limit. Go buy whatever you need for the gala. I want you to look spectacular. Bernice snatched the card from my hand, her fingers brushing mine with a cold, clammy touch. Finally, she breathed, inspecting the card like it was a holy relic. You see, Dante, this is how a wife should behave. She understands her place now. Dante walked over and put his arm around my shoulders, pulling me into a stiff hug that made my skin crawl. I knew you would do the right thing, babe, he said, kissing the top of my head. You just needed a little reminder of who is in charge now, about the gala. Mom wants it at the Ritz-Carlton. She wants the grand ballroom, and she wants to invite everyone, the church choir, the neighbors, even your business partners. She wants them to see how well we are doing. The Ritz-Carlton? I asked, feigning hesitation. That is expensive, Dante. The deposit alone will be. Do not start with the money again, Simone, Bernice snapped, cutting me off. You just said you wanted to make amends. This is how you do it. You throw me the party of the century. You show everyone that you honor your mother-in-law. If you are cheap about this, then your apology means nothing. I took a deep breath, pretending to struggle with the decision, then nodding slowly. Okay, you are right. You deserve the best. Bernice, I will book the Ritz. I will hire the best caterers, the best florists. I will make sure it is a night no one will ever forget. Dante squeezed my shoulder harder. She. Warning grip. See, Mom, she is learning. She is going to be a good wife from now on. Good, Bernice said, tucking the card into her cleavage. Now, if you will excuse us. Dante and I have shopping to do. Jasmine is waiting in the car. We have a lot of preparation for Saturday, and I do not want to be late for my fitting. They did not even invite me to go with them. They did not ask if I wanted to help choose the dress or the menu. They just took the money, took the card, and prepared to leave, treating me like the staff they clearly thought I was. Go ahead, I said, forcing a smile. Enjoy yourselves. I will stay here and make the calls for the party. I need to coordinate with the event planner. Dante gave me one last lingering look, a mixture of pity and contempt. Do not wait up, he said. We might celebrate a little tonight, now that the family is back together. I watched them leave the penthouse, their laughter echoing down the hallway as they headed for the elevator. Bernice was already on her phone bragging to someone about the $20,000. Dante was adjusting his watch, looking like he had just won the lottery. As soon as the elevator doors closed, the mask dropped from my face. I locked the deadbolt and leaned against the door, letting out a long, shaky breath. They were gone. They were out, spending money. They did not have celebrating a victory that was actually a defeat. I pulled out my burner phone, the one I used for contacting Vance, and sent a text. The pigeons have flown the coop. The nest is empty. You have a 3-hour window. 10 minutes later, Vance was at the service entrance carrying a toolbox and wearing a maintenance uniform. He worked quickly and efficiently, replacing the smoke detector in the master bedroom with the camera unit, then installing pinhole cameras in the living room and the kitchen. They will never know, he said, testing the feed on his tablet. The angle covers the entire bed in the living room. View catches the sofa and the bar. Audio is crisp too. Perfect, I said, watching the screen populate with the live feed of my own bedroom. It felt invasive, dirty but necessary. I needed them to hang themselves, and I needed it in high definition. Vance packed up his tools, leaving no trace of his presence. You sure about this, lady? He asked, pausing at the door. Once you see what happens in there, you cannot unsee it. I looked at the empty apartment, the space that was supposed to be my home, my sanctuary. I have already seen enough, I said. I just need the judge to see it too. Vance nodded and left, leaving me alone again. I spent the rest of the afternoon making calls, just as I had promised, but not the calls they expected. I called the Ritz-Carlton and booked the ballroom, but I put the deposit on a credit card that was linked to Dante's personal account. The one I knew had zero balance. Knowing the charge would go through initially as a hold, but would bounce when the final bill came due. I called the caterers and the florists, ordering the most expensive packages available, confident that by the time they asked for payment, the chaos would have already begun. Then I sat down at the kitchen island and opened my laptop, logging into the cloud server where Vance's camera feed was storing data. I watched as the sun set over the city, turning the sky a bruised purple, and waited. Around 8 o'clock the elevator chimed. Dante, Bernice, and Jasmine stumbled in drunk on champagne and hubris. They were carrying armfuls of shopping bags, tossing them onto the floor with careless abandon. I did not stick around to greet them. I had left a note saying I had a late meeting and would stay at my city apartment to be closer to the office. I wanted them to feel comfortable. I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to think I was gone, so they could show me exactly who they were. I drove to my office building, sitting in the dark of my executive suite, watching the feed on my monitor at 9:30. Bernice went to her room complaining of a headache, leaving Dante and Jasmine alone in the living room. I watched as my husband poured Jasmine a drink, his hand lingering on hers. I watched as she laughed, throwing her head back, exposing her neck to him. I watched as he pulled her close, whispering things in her ear that he had never whispered to me. And then I watched as he led her up the stairs to the master bedroom, to the bed. I had bought the bed I had slept in alone for so many nights. I did not look away. I forced myself to watch every second of it, to burn the image into my brain so that I would never ever be tempted to forgive him again. I watched them desecrate my home. I watched them laugh at my expense, and I felt my heart turn to stone. When it was over, when the lights went out in the penthouse and the city slept, I closed my laptop and stood up. I walked to the window, looking out at the glittering lights of Chicago. "Enjoy it, Dante," I whispered to the glass. "Enjoy your night, because it is the last one you will ever have in my world tomorrow. The bill comes due, and I am going to collect every single cent." My phone vibrated against the mahogany conference table every 3 minutes, like a heartbeat, monitoring the death of my marriage, $12,000 at Chanel, $8,000 at Cartier, $4,500 at La Perla. The notifications rolled in with relentless precision, documenting the sheer scale of their greed, while I sat in a quiet office across town, signing away the very roof over their heads. I was not at the office working on a merger today. I was at a title company, sitting across from a man named Mr. Henderson, a real estate investor who had been trying to buy the building where Bernice lived for years. He had offered me a cash buyout for the penthouse 3 months ago, and I had refused because I wanted my mother-in-law to be comfortable. Today, I had called him at 8 in the morning and told him the unit was his if he could close by noon, while Bernice was likely twirling in front of a 3-way mirror, admiring a gown that cost more than her annual charitable donations. I was initialing the page that turned her sanctuary into someone else's property. Mr. Henderson looked at me, his pen hovering over the check. "Are you sure about this, Simone?" he asked, looking at the below-market price I had agreed to just to expedite the sale. "This is a significant loss on your initial investment." I looked at the transaction alert that just popped up on my screen, $2,000 for a spa package at the Four Seasons for two. "It is not a loss, Mr. Henderson," I said, signing the final line with a flourish. "It is a liquidation fee. I am buying my freedom, and honestly, it is a bargain." Bernice and Jasmine were tearing through the magnificent mile like a hurricane made of entitlement and bad taste. I could imagine them walking into the boutique's heads held high. Bernice flashing that platinum card I had handed her, acting like she was the Dowager Countess of Chicago. She was probably telling the sales associates that her daughter-in-law insisted she have the best that I was. Finally learning my place. She was buying jewelry. She did not need luggage. She would have nowhere to store and clothes for a life she was about to lose. Meanwhile, I was finalizing the paperwork for the vehicles. Dante Porsche 911 and Bernice Range Rover were both leased under my consulting firm, assets provided to employees for business use, since neither of them were employees, and neither of them did any business. I had every right to revoke their access. I met with the repossession agent, a man named Rick, who looked like he could lift the cars with his bare hands in a coffee shop around the corner from the title company. I handed him the spare keys and the GPS tracking data. "The Porsche is currently parked in the garage at the Ritz-Carlton," I said, pointing to the dot on my phone map. "My husband is likely inside tasting menu options. He cannot afford." Rick nodded, taking the keys. "When do you want us to grab them?" "Wait until the night of the gala," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "Wait until they pull up to the valet stand in front of all their friends. Wait until they get out, looking like royalty. Then take them. I want them to walk home." Rick let out a low whistle. "That is cold." Lady. It is business, I replied, sipping my black coffee. They breached the contract. I am just enforcing the terms. My phone buzzed again. $1,500 at a high-end lingerie store. Jasmine was updating her wardrobe for her new life. As the lady of the house, she thought she was securing her future with silk and lace. She did not realize she was dressing up for an eviction. I could picture the scene perfectly. Bernice encouraging her, telling her that Dante liked red, telling her that she was going to be the wife I never was. They were bonding over my money, building a relationship on a foundation of theft. They were probably laughing about how easy it was to manipulate me, how I had folded like a cheap suit the moment Dante threatened to leave. They did not understand that I had not folded, I had just moved out of the way so they could run off the cliff without hitting me. I left the coffee shop and walked through the city, the cold wind off the lake biting at my cheeks. I felt strangely light, untethered the assets that had weighed me down. The physical manifestations of my desperate need to be accepted were falling away one by one. I stopped in front of a jewelry store, looking at the display in the window. There was a necklace there, a simple diamond solitaire that Dante had admired once, saying he would buy it for me when his company took off. He never did, of course, but I had bought him a Rolex for his birthday that year, hoping it would inspire him. Now I watched as another alert came through: $6,000. At a men's clothier, Dante was getting a new tuxedo for the gala. He wanted to look the part of the successful tycoon, while his mother celebrated her 65th year of being a leech. I called Arthur, my lawyer, just to check in. The deed is transferred, I told him. Bernice is officially trespassing as of this moment. Good, Arthur said, his voice crisp. She has no lease agreement with the new owner. Mr. Henderson has already issued the notice to vacate for Sunday morning. Noon sharp, the sheriff deputies are scheduled to assist. And the prenup, I asked, ironclad? Arthur assured me the forensic accountant is already flagging the transactions from today as dissipation of marital assets. We will deduct every single dollar they spend today, from whatever pitiful settlement Dante might have hoped for. Essentially, they are spending his money. Now, not yours. That thought gave me a grim satisfaction. Let them spend. Let them buy the whole city. Every swipe of that card was digging Dante deeper into a hole he would never climb out of. He was financing his own destruction, and he was doing it with a smile on his face. I decided to go to my own apartment, the small one in the West Loop that I had bought before I met Dante. I had kept it as a rental property, but it had been empty for a month. Walking into this space, it felt small, quiet, and incredibly safe. There were no marble floors here, no velvet benches, no pretentious art, just clean lines and silence. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, and watched the sun go down. The notifications on my phone finally slowed as the stores closed. Bernice and Jasmine were probably heading back to the penthouse, now exhausted from their hard work of spending my money. They would be showing Dante their haul, modeling the dresses, holding up the shoes. I imagined them in the living room, opening bottle after bottle of champagne, toasting to their cleverness. Bernice would be saying, "I told you she would break. She knows who the real boss is." Dante would be nodding, feeling powerful, feeling like he had tamed the shrew. They would sleep soundly tonight, surrounded by their loot, secure in their victory. They would dream of the gala, of the applause, of the envy of their friends. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness of the apartment wrap around me. I would sleep soundly too. For the first time in years, I did not have to worry about making them happy. I did not have to worry about buying their love. The transaction was complete, the receipt was printed, and the return policy had just expired. Tomorrow was the gala. Tomorrow was the stage they had demanded. I billed for them, and I had built it perfectly. I had spared no expense. I had given them the lights, the music, the audience. I had also rigged the trap doors. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered if Bernice had bought waterproof mascara. She was going to need it when the lights came up, and she realized she was not the star of the show. She was the clown. The sun rose over Chicago on Saturday morning, casting a cold, gray light into my West Loop apartment, but I had been awake for hours. My laptop glowing on the coffee table, like a portal to a different dimension. I was drinking coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, waiting for the final upload from Vance. He had texted me at 3 in the morning, with 2 words, "Got it." When the file finally appeared in my secure Dropbox folder, it was labeled simply, "The Smoking Gun." I hovered my cursor over the icon, my hand trembling slightly. This was it. The point of no return. Up until this moment, a small, foolish part of me, the part that still remembered our wedding vows, had hoped that maybe I was wrong. Maybe Dante was just weak. Maybe he was being manipulated by his mother. Maybe he still loved me in some twisted way. I clicked open the first video file, and that hope died. A violent, instant death. The camera angle was high and wide, covering the entire living room of the penthouse. The timestamp showed it was from last night, just hours after I had given them the credit card back. The room was littered with shopping bags, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, and Hermes scattered across the floor like the spoils of war. Dante and Jasmine were on the white sofa, the one I had custom ordered from Italy because Dante said he needed lumbar support. They were not just sitting, they were entangled. Jasmine was wearing one of the silk robes I had seen on the credit card statement earlier that day, laughing as she fed Dante a strawberry from a fruit platter. Bernice must have prepared, but it was what was hanging on the wall behind them that made bile rise in my throat. My wedding portrait. It was a massive canvas framed in gold, showing Dante and me on the cliffs of Santorini on our honeymoon, looking at each other with what I thought was love. I remembered that day. I remembered how he had held my face and told me I was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. And now there he was beneath that very image, undressing another woman in the home. I'd paid for drinking the wine I bought, disrespecting the sanctity of the vows we took. I watched as he kissed her neck, watched as he pulled her on top of him, watched as they engaged in acts he had not initiated with me in years. It was not just infidelity, it was a desecration. He looked up at the portrait once briefly and laughed, saying something I could not quite catch over the audio, then returned his attention to Jasmine as if erasing me from the narrative entirely. I forced myself to watch until the end, until they finally collapsed exhausted and smug amidst the debris of their shopping spree. I needed to see it. I needed the image burned into my retinas, so that when he stood before me later tonight begging for mercy, I would see this instead of the man I married. Then I opened the audio file Vance had labeled this one, the board meeting. It was a recording from the kitchen taken while Dante and Jasmine were in the other room. It was Bernice. Voice, crystal clear and chillingly sober. "She is desperate," Dante Bernice was saying, and I could hear the sound of her counting cash, probably the withdrawal I had authorized. "She gave us everything we asked for. The moment you threatened to leave, she is weak. She has no self-esteem without you. She thinks her money buys her worth. But we know the truth. Do not we?" I heard Dante's voice muffled at first, then clearer as he walked into the kitchen. "Yeah," she folded like a cheap suit. I almost felt bad for her, almost. She looked so pathetic standing there apologizing. "Do not, you dare feel bad." Bernice snapped, her voice sharp as a whip. "That woman is a cash cow, Dante. Nothing more. You milk her for everything she is worth. You get her to sign over the deed to the penthouse. You get her to put your name on the investment accounts. And once we have enough liquidity, once we have secured the assets, then you divorce her." "But the prenup," Dante said, sounding worried. "We will work around it," Bernice assured him. "If you stay married for 5 years, the infidelity clause has a loophole, or we just make her life so miserable she pays you to leave. Either way, we win. Jasmine is the future. Dante. Simone is just the stepping stone. Look at her. She is aging. She is hard. She is not like us. You deserve a woman who worships you, not one who competes with you." Keep her happy for another 6 months. Drain the accounts. Get the cars in your name. Then we cut her loose. I sat back in my chair, the silence of my apartment deafening compared to the noise in my head. Cash cow stepping stone, drain the accounts. The pain I expected to feel, the heartbreak, the devastation, it simply did not arrive. Instead, a cold, hard clarity settled over me like a suit of armor. I realized then that I was not grieving the loss of my husband. I was grieving the loss of the illusion. I was grieving the time I had wasted trying to please people who saw me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. They did not hate me. They did not even respect me enough to hate me. They viewed me as an object, a tool, a means to an end. Bernice did not want a daughter-in-law. She wanted a sponsor. Dante did not want a wife. He wanted a venture capitalist who slept in his bed. My sadness evaporated, replaced by a focused, terrifying rage. It was a clean feeling, a powerful feeling for years. I had made myself smaller to fit into their world. I had dimmed my light so Dante would not feel overshadowed. I had silenced my voice so Bernice would feel authoritative. I had apologized for my success. I had apologized for my strength. No more. I opened my video editing software, the same program I used to create pitch decks for billion-dollar mergers. I dragged the video file of Dante and Jasmine onto the timeline, then I dragged the audio file of Bernice plotting my financial ruin underneath it. I began to cut. I synced Bernice's voice saying, "Cash cow," with the image of Dante kissing Jasmine. I synced Dante, saying she looked pathetic, with the image of Bernice counting my money. I created a montage, a 2-minute masterpiece of their depravity, their greed, and their absolute lack of morality. I added subtitles just in case the audio was not clear enough for the back row of the ballroom. I color-corrected the footage to make sure every detail of their betrayal was sharp and undeniable. When I was finished, I exported the file and saved it to 3 different flash drives. I encrypted one, sent one to Arthur, and put the third one in my purse. I looked at the clock. It was 4 in the afternoon. The gala started at 7. Bernice and Jasmine were probably getting their hair done right now, laughing about how they had played me. Dante was probably putting on his new $6,000 tuxedo, checking himself in the mirror thinking he was the smartest man in the room. They were preparing for a coronation. I was preparing for an execution. I walked to my closet and pulled out the dress I had bought months ago for this night. It was a red gown, structured and bold. The kind of dress Bernice would say was too aggressive, the kind of dress that demanded attention. I put it on, zipping it up slowly, watching myself in the mirror. The fabric hugged my curves like armor. The red color was vibrant, like fresh blood, like a warning sign. I applied my makeup with precision, sharp eyeliner, bold red lips. I did not look like a victim. I did not look like a stepping stone. I looked like the woman who signed the checks. I put on the diamond earrings I had bought for myself, the ones Dante said were too flashy. I put on my heels, the ones that made me taller than him. I picked up the flash drive, weighing it in my palm. It was so light, so small, yet it contained the power to level a dynasty. "I am coming for you, Bernice," I whispered to the empty room. "I am coming for you. Dante and I am bringing the receipts." I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. I did not look back at the apartment. I was moving forward into a future where I owed nothing to anyone, into a night that would go down in history. The drive to the Ritz-Carlton was smooth, the city lights blurring past me. I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes before a storm. I pulled up to the valet, the same place where Dante and Bernice would be arriving soon, expecting to be treated like royalty. I handed my keys to the attendant, keeping my head high. Let the show begin. I thought walking through the revolving doors into the lobby where the air smelled of expensive lilies and impending doom. Tonight the bank was open late and I was calling in all the debts. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton. Chicago smelled of white peonies and unearned money. $1,000 floral arrangements cascaded from every table, creating a garden of excess that I had paid for with the sweat of my brow and the hours of my life. The crystal chandeliers overhead cast a golden glow over the room, illuminating the 200 guests Bernice had insisted on inviting. There were members of the church choir neighbors she had feuded with for years, and random acquaintances she wanted to impress. They were all there to witness the coronation of Bernice Williams, a woman who had never worked a day in her life but spent money like she printed it in her basement. I walked into the room wearing the red dress that hugged my body like a second skin. The fabric moved with me, liquid and dangerous, a stark contrast to the sea of pastels and creams Bernice had mandated for the dress code. She wanted everyone to look soft. She wanted everyone to look submissive. I looked like a warning, like, sign. The hostess at the entrance scanned her list and frowned when I gave my name. Simone Williams. She repeated, her finger tracing down the page past the head table, past the family tables, past the VIP section. Oh, here you are. Table 42. She pointed toward the back corner of the room, right next to the swinging doors of the catering kitchen. Enjoy your evening? I almost laughed. Table 42. The woman who signed the check for this entire circus was seated next to the trash cans and the waiter's station. It was a petty, calculated insult, designed to put me in my place, designed to show everyone that while I might pay the bills, I did not have a seat at the table. Literally, I made my way through the crowd, heads turning as I passed the red dress, doing exactly what I intended it to do. People whispered behind their hands, wondering who I was, wondering why I looked so fierce amidst the forced frivolity. I saw Jamal and Sarah sitting at table 5, looking uncomfortable and out of place. Sarah caught my eye and mouthed, "I am sorry." I gave her a small nod, acknowledging their support, but keeping my distance. I did not want them caught in the blast radius. Then I saw them. Bernice was holding court in the center of the room, wearing a gold sequined gown that I knew cost $8,000 because I had seen the charge yesterday. She looked like a disco ball that had gained sentience, laughing too loudly. Her hands dripping with jewelry that sparkled under the lights. She was telling a group of women about her son, the genius entrepreneur, how he spoiled her, how he insisted she have only the best. And there was the genius himself. Dante stood by the bar, looking every inch the successful tycoon in his new tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne like it was a scepter, but he was not alone. Jasmine was draped over him like a cheap suit jacket. She was wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously bridal cut, low and tight, showing off the body Bernice had praised as being so much better than mine. They were not hiding it. They were not even trying to be subtle. Dante's hand rested on the small of her back, fingers splayed in a possessive claim. Jasmine was whispering in his ear, giggling and touching his chest with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. They looked like the couple of honor, and I looked like the uninvited guest. Dante spotted me across the room, and his smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he composed himself. He whispered something to Jasmine, kissed her on the cheek, and made his way toward me, weaving through the crowd with the arrogance of a man who thinks he is untouchable. "You came," he said when he reached me, his eyes scanning my red dress with a mixture of lust and annoyance. "I thought you might stay home and sulk. You are sitting at table 42, by the way. Mom did not want you causing drama near the head table." I looked at him, the man I had vowed to love and cherish, seeing nothing but a stranger in a rented costume. I would not miss this for the world. "Dante," I said, my voice smooth and calm. "I paid for the ticket. After all, I want to see the show." "Keep your voice down," he hissed, leaning in close. "You smell like trouble, Simone. Do not ruin this night for Mom. She is happy. Look at her. She is finally getting the respect she deserves. Just sit in the back, keep your mouth shut, and maybe later I will come by and say hello properly." He winked at me, a gesture that was supposed to be charming but felt greasy and cheap. He thought he still had me. He thought the promise of his attention was enough to keep me in line. "Go back to your date, Dante." I said, nodding toward Jasmine, who was watching us with a smug expression. She looks lonely. She is helping Mom with the guests, he said, defensive. Simply because you refuse to be a good hostess does not mean she has to suffer. Jasmine stepped up. She is doing your job. Simone, remember that. I will remember. I promised. I will remember everything. He walked away, adjusting his cufflinks, strutting back to the center of the room to play the role of the dutiful son and the successful husband, leaving his actual wife standing by the kitchen doors. I took my seat at table 42, surrounded by elderly, distant cousins who did not know who I was and did not care. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands steady, my mind clear. I watched as the room filled up as the waiters began circulating with the appetizers I had selected: the lobster bisque, the truffle arancini, the wagyu beef sliders. It was a menu fit for royalty, paid for by the peasant in the corner. The lights dimmed, and a spotlight hit the stage. The band struck up a fanfare, and Bernice walked up the stairs, grabbing the microphone with the hunger of a starving woman finding a feast. "Welcome, everyone," she boomed. Her voice amplified across the hall. "Welcome to my celebration. Look at this room, look at this love. I am so blessed, truly blessed. The Lord has favored me." There were murmurs of amen from the crowd. Bernice beamed, soaking it up. "I want to thank my son, Dante." She continued, gesturing for him to join her on stage. "My beautiful, brilliant boy. He made this all possible. He works so hard. He gives so much. He treats his mother like a queen because he knows the value of family." Dante walked up the stairs, waving to the crowd, basking in the lie. He stood next to her, looking humble and proud, the perfect picture of filial piety. "And I want to thank Jasmine," Bernice added, beckoning the mistress to the stage. "Come up here, honey. Jasmine is like a daughter to me. She has been my rock, my stylist, my confidant. She helped plan this entire evening, giving of her time and her heart, purely out of love." Jasmine glided up the stairs, standing on Bernice, other side completing the tableau. The mother, the son, and the mistress, the unholy trinity of my destruction. Bernice looked out at the crowd, her eyes skipping right over the back corner where I sat. She did not even mention my name. She did not acknowledge my existence. I was the ghost in the machine, the invisible engine that kept their lights on. "Some people think success is about money," Bernice preached, her voice rising with emotion. "But I tell you, success is about loyalty. It is about surrounding yourself with people who know their place, who know how to honor their elders, who know that the man is the head and the woman is the heart. Dante has found his path, and I am just so proud to be his mother." The crowd applauded, cheering for the lies, cheering for the theft, cheering for the infidelity. I sat there watching them clap, watching Dante kiss his mother cheek, watching Jasmine beam like she had just won a pageant. It was perfect. It was exactly what I needed. They had climbed so high on the pedestal. I built for them. They were so confident, so secure, so sure that the ground beneath them was solid. I reached into my purse and wrapped my fingers around the flash drive, the cold metal feeling like the trigger of a loaded gun. I stood up, the red dress rustling around my legs. I did not rush. I did not run. Walked toward the audio-visual booth, located just to the side of the stage. The sound technician, a young guy in a black hoodie, looked up as I approached. "I am the one who paid your invoice," I said, my voice low and authoritative. "And I have a last-minute addition to the presentation, a tribute video for the birthday girl." He looked at the flash drive, then at me. "I usually need approval from the event planner," he said, hesitant. "I am the event planner." I lied smoothly. "And I am the bank." "This is a surprise. From her son. Play it now." He took the drive and plugged it in. I watched his screen as the file loaded, waiting for the progress bar to reach 100%. On stage, Bernice was raising a glass of champagne, To toast herself to 65 years of excellence, she said, to a future that is even brighter than the past. The technician hit play. The music cut out abruptly, replaced by the hiss of static. The giant screen behind them, which had been displaying a slideshow of Bernice photos, flickered and went black. The room went silent. Guests looking around in confusion. Bernice turned to look at the screen, a frown marring her perfect makeup. Dante stepped forward, looking annoyed, likely thinking it was a technical glitch. Then the image resolved, crisp and clear in high definition. 4K resolution, huge on the 20-foot screen. It was my bedroom. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. Bernice's eyes went wide. Dante froze his glass of champagne, tilting dangerously in his hand. Jasmine covered her mouth. And then the audio kicked in, loud and unmistakable, booming through the concert-quality speakers. Cash cow, Bernice's voice sneered, echoing off the walls. Nothing more. I stepped out from the shadows of the booth, walking toward the center of the room, my red dress blazing like a signal fire. "Happy birthday, Bernice," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "I hope you like your gift, because you paid for it with your soul." The silence in the ballroom was not the reverent kind reserved for prayer. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a room holding its collective breath, waiting for the guillotine to drop. The introductory static of the video I had queued up was humming through the speakers, a low, menacing sound that vibrated in the floorboards. But before the image could fully resolve, before the first frame of their betrayal could hit the screen, a new player entered the stage. The double doors to the kitchen swung open with violence, and the general manager of the Ritz-Carlton marched onto the floor, flanked by 2 security guards. He did not look like a man who was enjoying the party. He looked like a man who was about to lose his job because a $45,000 tab was sitting open with no way to close it. He walked straight up to the stage, bypassing the guests, bypassing the waitstaff, and signaled to the sound technician to cut the feed. The screen flickered and went dark, the static replaced by the sudden absence of noise. Dante looked relieved, thinking he had been saved by a technical difficulty. But his relief was premature. "Mr. Williams," the manager said. His voice projected clearly, even without a microphone, "we have a problem with the payment method on file." Dante laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound that cracked in the middle. "What are you talking about? Put it on the card? I gave you the black card." "That card has been declined, sir," the manager said, loud enough for the first 5 tables to hear. "We attempted to run the 50% deposit and the pre-authorization for the bar tab. It came back as invalid account. Closed, reported lost or stolen." Bernice stepped forward, clutching her pearls, her face going from pale to a splotchy red. "Excuse me?" she demanded. "Do you know who we are? This is my son. He is a tech mogul. You are making a mistake. Run it again." "We ran it 3 times. "Ma'am," the manager said, his patience clearly evaporating. "We also tried the backup card provided for the room block. Declined, insufficient funds. We need a valid form of payment for $45,000 immediately, or we are shutting this event down right now and calling the authorities for theft of services." The room erupted into whispers. $45,000, declined, theft. The words rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Dante looked frantic. He patted his pockets as if 45 grand might magically appear in his tuxedo jacket. Then his eyes scanned the room wildly until they landed on me, sitting in the back corner in my red dress. He jumped off the stage and ran toward me, pushing past his mother. Friends, knocking into a waiter holding a tray of champagne. He did not care about dignity anymore. He only cared about survival. He reached my table, breathless and sweating his bow tie. "Crooked Simone." "Give me your card," he hissed, extending his hand. "Give it to me now, or so help me God." I looked at his hand, then up at his face. Seeing the panic, the desperation the absolute entitlement give you. "My card?" I asked, my voice calm, loud enough to carry over the murmurs. "Why would I do that, Dante? I thought you were the provider. I thought I was just the bad investment." "Stop playing games," he shouted, grabbing my arm. You cut the cards. You did this. Fix it now before you embarrass Mom any further. I stood up, shaking off his hand. I smoothed down the front of my red dress and picked up my clutch, walking past him toward the stage. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea, their eyes wide with anticipation. They knew the power had shifted. They could smell it. I walked up the stairs to where the manager stood waiting. Bernice was there, trembling with rage. Jasmine was shrinking back into the shadows, trying to make herself invisible. I took the microphone from the stand, the weight of it feeling good in my hand, solid and real. I am sorry, everyone, I said, my voice booming through the speakers, crisp and clear. I hate to interrupt the celebration, but there seems to be a confusion about who is paying for tonight festivities. Bernice lunged for me, but the security guard stepped in her way. Hold on, ma'am, he set his hand on his belt. Let her speak. My husband here. I pointed to Dante, who was standing at the foot of the stage, looking up at me like a dog waiting to be kicked. Seems to think that I am still his ATM. He seems to think that after cheating on me, after using my money to fund his mistress lifestyle, and after his mother called me a cash cow, that I would still foot the bill for their ego trip. Gasps filled the room. Genuine shocked gasps. The church ladies clutched their chests. The neighbors' jaw dropped. I turned to the manager. Mr. Sterling. Is it? I want to make something very clear for the record, and for the police report. I did not authorize this party. I did not sign the contract. And I definitely did not agree to pay $45,000, so my mother-in-law could brag about money she does not have. But you are his wife, the manager said, looking confused. You share assets, not anymore, I said, smiling a cold shark. Like smile, I cut him off yesterday, Mr. Sterling. I canceled every card, I froze every joint account, and I filed for divorce this morning. If he wants to throw a party, he can pay for it with his own money. Oh wait, that is right, he does not have any, because his entire career is a lie. Funded by me. Dante screamed from the floor. You lying witch, pay the bill. Simone, pay it, or I swear I will destroy you. With what, Dante? I asked, leaning into the mic. With what money are you going to destroy me? The money you spent on Jasmine's shoes? The money you wasted on a startup that produces nothing but debt? You are broke, Dante. You are destitute. And as of right now, you are trespassing on my patience. I turned to Bernice, who looked like she was having a stroke. Bernice, you wanted a grand entrance. You wanted everyone to look at you. Well, look around. They are all looking. Are you happy now? Is this the legacy you wanted to build? Bernice let out a screech of pure primal fury. Get out, she. Out! Screamed, spitting flying from her mouth. Get out of my party, you jealous barren hag. You are ruining everything. Security, get her out. The manager looked at me, then at Bernice, then at the decline receipt in his hand. I think I will let her stay, he said quietly. She is the only one here who seems to have any credit. Bernice's face turned a shade of purple. I had never seen in nature. She looked around the room, realizing she was losing the audience, realizing the facade was crumbling, and in her panic, she made the fatal mistake of doubling down on her cruelty. You are nothing, she yelled at me. Nothing but a checkbook. Dante only married you because I told him to, because we needed the capital. You think he ever loved you? Look at you. You are hard, you are cold, and you could not even give him a son. Jasmine is twice the woman you are, and tonight we are going to celebrate her and throw you in the gutter where you belong. The room went deadly silent, the insult hanging in the air, gross and unforgivable even. Dante looked shocked by her venom. I looked at her, at the woman I had tried so hard to please, the woman I had housed and fed and clothed, and I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, just a clinical detachment. The time for talking was over. It was time for the show. You are right, Bernice, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I am just a checkbook, but you forgot one thing. Checkbooks have records, and tonight I brought the receipts. I nodded to the sound technician who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. Hit it, I said. The technician did not hesitate. He pressed play. and the screen behind me, which had been dark, roared back to life. This time, there was no interruption. This time, there was no manager to stop it. This time, the truth was going to run in 4K resolution, and there was nowhere for them to hide. The image that filled the massive screen was unmistakable. It was the interior of the penthouse living room. The timestamp in the corner read 9:45 p.m. The previous night, the quality was crystal clear, capturing every detail of the expensive furniture I had paid for and the people who were currently desecrating it. The audio boomed through the ballroom speakers, surround sound betrayal. Bernice's voice loud and clear, saying she is desperate, Dante. She gave us everything we asked for the moment you threatened to leave. She is weak. The crowd watched in horrified fascination as the video cut to Dante and Jasmine on the sofa, entangled in a way that left zero room for interpretation or denial. There was a collective gasp as the image of my husband kissing another woman filled the room, the wedding portrait of us hanging on the wall behind them like a silent witness to the crime. Bernice screamed, a high, thin sound like a trapped animal. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, flailing her arms at the screen, trying to block the projection with her body. "Turn it off right now!" But the video continued, mercilessly cutting to the kitchen scene where Bernice was counting the cash I had given her. "That woman is a cash cow, Dante. Nothing more, you milk her for everything she is worth." The words echoed off the vaulted ceilings, cash cow milk. Her drain the accounts, every vile thing she had said, every plot she had hatched, every ounce of her malice was broadcast for her friends, her pastor, her neighbors to hear. I watched the faces in the crowd. The church choir members looked like they were going to be sick. The neighbors were recording with their phones, their expressions a mix of glee and disgust. Sarah and Jamal were holding hands, looking vindicated. Dante stood frozen at the foot of the stage, his eyes fixed on the screen where his own voice was currently detailing how pathetic I looked, apologizing to him. He looked small, insignificant, stripped of his bravado and his lies. Jasmine tried to run. She grabbed her purse and made a dash for the side exit, but the crowd was too dense, and people were not moving. They were blocking her path intentionally, or not, forcing her to stand there and watch her own shame played out on a 20-foot screen. I walked over to Bernice, who was now sobbing on the stage, pulling at her hair. "Look at it, Bernice," I said, leaning down to whisper in her ear. "Look at your legacy. You wanted everyone to know how close you and Jasmine are. Well, now they know you plotted with a mistress to rob your daughter-in-law. Is that what they teach at Bible study?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with hate and fear. "You are the devil," she hissed. "No," I said, standing up straight and addressing the room one last time. "I am just the karma you ordered, and unfortunately for you, the bill is due immediately." The video ended with a freeze frame of Dante laughing at my wedding picture. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and judging. Bernice tried to rally. She stood up, shaky on her feet, and grabbed the microphone, trying to salvage the unsalvageable. "It is a fake!" she cried, her voice cracking. "It is AI. She made it up. She is a computer genius. She created this to hurt me. Do not believe it." But nobody moved. Nobody clapped. Nobody came to her defense. The evidence was too raw, too specific, too consistent with the woman they secretly knew her to be. From the back of the room, a slow clap started. It was Sarah standing up at table 5, clapping slowly, deliberately. Then Jamal stood up, joining her. Then a few others, until a ripple of applause moved through the room, not for Bernice, but for the truth. Dante turned to me, his face a mask of panic. "Simone, please let us go home. Let us talk about this. We can fix this." "Home?" I asked, talking into the dead microphone, which I then dropped onto the stage with a thud. "You do not have a home, Dante." And as if on cue, the double doors at the back of the ballroom opened again. This time it was not a manager. It was the Chicago Police Department, accompanied by a team of men in jumpsuits carrying clipboards and tow truck keys. The cavalry had arrived and they were not here to negotiate, they were here to collect. I walked down the stairs of the stage, my red dress flowing around me like victory. Leaving Bernice sobbing on the floor and Dante shaking in his rented shoes, I walked straight toward the police officers who were scanning the room, looking for their targets. "Over here, officers," I said, pointing a manicured finger at my husband and his mother. "The individuals in possession of the stolen vehicles are right there." The crowd parted, creating a path for the law, a path for justice, and a path for me to walk out of that toxic life forever. But I was not leaving yet. I wanted to see the final item on my checklist. Crossed off. I wanted to see the repossession. Officer Miller. A man with a face like granite stepped forward. "Mr. Dante Williams?" he asked, his voice booming. Dante swallowed hard. "Yes. We have a warrant for the seizure of a Porsche 911 and a Range Rover. Autobiography registered to SJW Consulting, reported as misappropriated assets. We also have an eviction order for one, Bernice Williams. Effective immediately." Bernice wailed. "A sound of pure despair. Eviction," she cried tonight. "But I have guests. I have gifts. You have nothing." Officer Miller said, cold and professional, hand over the keys. Ma'am Bernice looked at Dante, then at Jasmine, then at the crowd of people watching her downfall with morbid curiosity. With trembling hands, she reached into her clutch and pulled out the key fob to the Range Rover, the symbol of her status, the chariot she rode to church. Dante fumbled in his pockets, producing the Porsche keys. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Simone, baby, do not do this. How am I supposed to get home?" I shrugged my face, a mask of indifference. "Try Uber. I hear they have great rates for single men." The repo team moved in, snatching the keys and heading for the doors. The police officers handed Bernice the eviction notice, a thick packet of legal misery that she had to accept in front of 200 witnesses. "You have until noon tomorrow to vacate the premises." Officer Miller stated. "Anything left in the unit after that time will be considered abandoned property and moved to the curb." Jasmine, seeing the ship sinking fast, made her move. She stepped away from Dante, putting distance between herself and the loser who just lost his wheels. "You said you owned the company," she shouted at him, her voice shrill. "You said the cars were yours. You said she was just the secretary." Dante reached for her. "Jasmine. Wait. I can explain." "Explain what?" she spat. "That you are broke. That you live with your mommy. That your wife owns the clothes on your back. I am done." "Dante, do not call me." She turned and ran, pushing her way through the crowd, her heels clicking a frantic retreat. Nobody stopped her. This time, she was just a rat fleeing the ship, and nobody cared about the rat. Bernice collapsed into a chair, fanning herself with the eviction notice. "Oh, Lord," she moaned. "Oh, Lord, why are you testing me?" I walked up to her one last time, leaning in close, so only she could hear. "The Lord isn't testing you, Bernice. I am, and you failed. And you." I turned my back on the ballroom, leaving the wreckage of the Williams dynasty behind me. The sound of Bernice wailing and the murmurs of the stunned crowd faded with every step I took toward the exit, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor of the lobby. I did not run, and I did not rush. I walked with the measured pace of a woman who had just concluded the most important business deal of her life, ensuring that every person watching knew that I was leaving on my own terms. The heavy double doors of the Ritz-Carlton swung open, and the cool Chicago night air hit my face like a blessing, cleansing the scent of expensive perfume and desperation from my skin. The valet stand was busy with guests leaving early, eager to gossip about the scandal they had just witnessed, but the attendants recognized me immediately. I handed my ticket to the young man who had taken my car hours ago. His eyes wide as he looked past me at the commotion spilling out from the hotel entrance, he scrambled to retrieve my vehicle, not the Porsche or the Range Rover that were currently being hoisted onto flatbed trucks by the repo team around the corner, but my car. The vintage Aston Martin I had bought with my first big bonus years ago and kept in storage. A secret indulgence that Dante and Bernice never knew existed because they never cared to ask what I did with the money I did not spend on them. As I waited, Jamal and Sarah burst through the doors, their faces flushed with adrenaline. They looked around frantically until they spotted me and ran over. Sarah reached me first, pulling me into a hug that felt like it might squeeze the breath out of me. But it was grounding. It was real. "That was the bravest thing I have ever seen," Sarah whispered into my ear, her voice shaking. "I have wanted to say those things to her for 5 years, and you finally did it. You freed us all, Simone." I pulled back and looked at them both. Jamal looked like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, a burden he had carried. Since childhood finally set down, "I am sorry it had to happen like that." Jamal said, his eyes sad but clear. "But you were right about everything. I am done covering for him. Simone and I am done letting Mom manipulate us. Sarah and I are going to take a step back from them. We are going to focus on our own family. You do not have to choose sides." I told him he was still their son and brother despite everything. "I am not choosing sides," Jamal corrected. "I am choosing sanity. Mom and Dante. They are drowning and they are determined to pull everyone down with them. I cannot let them do that to Sarah or to me anymore. Go live your life, Simone. You deserve to be happy." The valet pulled up in my silver Aston, the engine purring with a deep, throaty growl that turned heads even amidst the chaos. I tipped him $100 and slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool against my skin, the smell of vintage upholstery and freedom filling my senses. I rolled down the window one last time as Jamal and Sarah waved goodbye, standing together on the curb, the only two people from that life worth keeping. I put the car in gear and pulled away, merging into the stream of traffic on Michigan Avenue, leaving the hotel, the gala, and the ruins of my marriage in the rearview mirror. Driving through the city that night felt different. The skyline, which had always looked like a fortress of unachievable dreams, now looked like a playground. I drove past the high-rise where the penthouse was located, where the eviction notice was currently taped to the door, and I felt nothing. No nostalgia, no regret, just a clinical acknowledgement that a bad investment had been liquidated. I headed toward the West Loop, toward the loft I had bought under my maiden name 6 months ago, when the first suspicions about Dante had started to creep in. It was a raw industrial space, with exposed brick and high beams, totally different from the sterile luxury Bernice demanded. It was a space I had designed for myself, filled with art I loved, books I wanted to read, and furniture that was comfortable rather than just expensive. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, flashing with notifications. I glanced at it briefly, seeing a string of texts from numbers I did not have saved. Likely flying monkeys from the church, or Dante friends, trying to intervene. I picked up the phone and did the one thing I had not done yet. I opened the settings and changed my number, confirming the request I had queued up with my carrier that morning. The signal bars flickered and reset. Silence. Absolute, blessed silence. No one could reach me. No one could demand explanations or apologies or money. I was a ghost to them. Now a legend they would whisper about but never see again. I pulled into the private garage of my building, the heavy steel gate rolling down behind me, sealing me in safety. I took the private elevator up to my floor, the mechanical hum, the only sound in the quiet night. When I unlocked the door to my loft, the air was still and peaceful. I kicked off my red heels by the door, letting my bare feet feel the cool, polished concrete floor. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine, a robust red that cost $20 and tasted better than the $1,000 champagne Dante had been swilling. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. The lights of Chicago spread out before me like a grid of diamonds somewhere out there. Bernice was likely screaming at a police officer or sobbing into a pillow, wondering how her script had gone so wrong. Somewhere out there, Dante was realizing that he had no ride, no home, and no wife to fix it for him. Jasmine was probably already in an Uber, blocking his number, deleting the photos of them together. I took a sip of wine and felt the warmth spread through my chest, the knot of anxiety that had lived in my stomach for 5 years. The constant low-level hum of trying to be enough, of trying to buy affection was gone, replaced by a profound sense of lightness. I was 34 years old. I was a senior partner at a top hedge fund. I was beautiful. I was intelligent. And for the first time in my adult life, I was entirely my own woman. I did not belong to a husband who saw me as a paycheck. I did not belong to a mother-in-law who saw me as a servant. I belonged to Simone. I thought about what came next. The divorce proceedings would be ugly, but Arthur would handle them. The forensic audit would likely uncover more crimes, but that was a problem for Dante and the IRS. Not for me. I would have to rebuild my social circle. Weed out the people who were only there for the proximity to the Williams drama. But that was fine. I preferred a small circle of truth to a stadium of lies. I walked over to the sound system and put on some old-school soul music, the kind my own mother used to listen to when she was cleaning the house on Sundays, singing along with her off-key voice, telling me that as long as we had our dignity, we were rich. I swayed a little to the music, the red dress. Swirling around my legs, I caught my reflection in the glass of the window, and I did not see the tired woman who had walked into the Gucci store yesterday. I saw a warrior who had just won a war without firing a single shot. Bernice had wanted to teach me a lesson. She wanted me to learn my place. Well, I had learned it. My place was in the boardroom. My place was in the driver's seat of an Aston Martin. My place was here in this quiet sanctuary, bought and paid for by my own resilience. I raised my glass to the city, to the night, and to the woman in the reflection. To freedom. I whispered the word, tasting sweet and sharp on my tongue. I finished the wine and set the glass in the sink. I turned off the lights, leaving only the glow of the city to illuminate my new life. I walked to the bedroom, a room that had never seen Dante, a bed that would never know his betrayal. I lay down, pulling the heavy duvet up to my chin, and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I was not worried about what tomorrow would bring, because whatever it was, I knew I could afford it. The nightmare was over. The dream was just beginning, and as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that the best revenge was not the video, or the eviction, or the repossession. The best revenge was the fact that I was going to wake up tomorrow, happy, and they were going to wake up with nothing but the consequences of their own audacity. I slept dreamless and deep, the sleep of the just, the sleep of the free, and when the sun rose the next morning, it rose on a world where Simone Williams was no longer a victim, she was the victor. This story teaches us a profound lesson about self-worth. You cannot buy respect, and you should never have to pay for love. For years, Simone used her success to purchase a sense of belonging, only to discover that affection with a price tag is merely a transaction, not a relationship. Her journey reminds us that financial independence is a tool for freedom, not a means to lease loyalty from those who despise us. True empowerment comes when we stop shrinking ourselves to fit where we are merely tolerated and start walking away from tables where respect is not served. If you have ever had to cut off toxic family to find your peace, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice.